So, apparently, there is a poster that showed up at the game yesterday. The Tua receipts with all of the people who have said not so nice things about Tua, with Big Cat exempted because apparently he's come around. Big Cat's been crossed off. There are two familiar faces there, Chris Sims and yours truly. We are on the Tua receipts. Subtotal tip amount due. That would be one hell of a dinner party, I will say that. But I don't know that I want to get off that. I'm going to stay on there until he makes a big throw in a big spot. Now, Coach Garrett did point out that at Alabama, when he replaced Jalen Hurts, he made a pretty big throw in a pretty big spot. But I want to see a big throw in a big spot in an NFL game, in a playoff game, season on the line, 20-yard out, a Jimmy G throw. I want to see a Jimmy G throw that actually works, not a reminder that there's a limit on what the guy can do. I want to see Tua punch through that limit. I want to see him do something more than what this offense that's been constructed specifically for him allows him to do and calls upon him to do. And maybe he won't have to. Maybe they'll keep winning games exactly the way they are, and there'll never be a moment where, he's got to do what we saw Kirk Cousins do. And frankly, I wouldn't have thought Kirk Cousins could have done it. So there's always an opportunity for somebody to make a big throw in a big spot when you believe that they can. Anyway, it's superlatives time, and I'm taking your time because you want to give Tua some praise. So I'll shut up.
Oh, well, I was going to say, the Tua stands can be mad at you, but they should be happy with me because my first superlative this week is Super Tua. Because he was great yesterday against, we'll call them my Cleveland Browns. Because, look, the Browns defense is bad. They went through the Browns defense like poo through a goose, and they had 195 yards rushing. But talking about another strong game, all right, 25-32, 285 yards, 3 touchdowns, spread the ball around effectively. Tyreek Hill didn't have 100 yards. Jalen Waddle didn't have 100 yards, but they were still really, really effective. He's now thrown for 10 touchdowns and no interceptions since returning from the concussion in week 7. Each of the last 3 games, he's had at least 285 yards and 3 touchdowns. All right, so he's been really good. All right, Mike, and you can say, do it in the playoffs. Do it in the playoffs. Nah, I'm just wearing a Vikings jersey over here because that's the kind of guy I am, and it was the game of the century yesterday. But Tua Tagovailoa is still playing really good football, and I am ready to acknowledge that.
Hey, I'm not Cajun, first of all. I'm trying to figure out your voices. You've got that kind of mocking voice that you use that reminds me of when Michael Scott made fun of Dwight Schrute for being a nerd in the basketball episode of The Office. But I don't know what that one was. That's a new one you're breaking out for me. It does sound Cajun.
That was a new one.
It does sound Cajun. I'm not Cajun.
It was a little Coach O in there. Yeah, I guess it was.
Yeah. But look, Tua is doing exactly what the offense calls upon him to do, and this is why Mike McDaniel is a candidate for Coach of the Year. See, this is what makes it harder for Nathaniel Hackett and Josh McDaniels to stay employed. You've got guys who are showing that they know what they're doing. O'Connell, McDaniel, not McDaniels, not Hackett. Makes it very hard, very hard. Why can't I have one of those guys? Why can't I remember when Andy Reid, his first year with the Chiefs, after he got fired by the Eagles, said Andy Reid's going to get a lot of coaches fired because owners are going to think, I just go pluck a guy, I just bring a new guy in and everything's going to be fine. This could get some guys fired, both who currently have jobs and in the future, if you can go out and find yourself a Kevin O'Connell or a Mike McDaniel who can do what their respective teams are doing. My first and only one, because we've talked too much about the Vikings-Bills games, Sims likes to say rubbing is racing. That's his justification for stuff happens on the field and you shouldn't always throw a flag. I say running ain't winning for the Bears. This is a hell of a fact. The Bears are the first team in league history, according to NFL research, with 5 straight games of 225 or more rushing yards. The problem is they're 1-4 in those games. So they presumably have more wins than one, and it was that game 3 weeks ago tonight against the Patriots where they shocked New England. But otherwise, they just keep losing. They feel like they're a better team than they are. They just can't get the outcome, and that defense has really betrayed them. Gee, you trade away Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith, and I guess you shouldn't be surprised when you can't stop the Lions. The Lions, for crying out loud. But Justin Fields is phenomenal, that run, but it came right after an ugly pick 6. So Fields has a chance to be a superstar, but they've got some things they got to iron out in Chicago, and they're going to have the money and the draft picks this offseason to build the team around him. There's reason for hope in Chicago because Fields potentially is the best guy from that 2021 quarterback class.
Yeah, and the other guy that was the number 1 overall pick of that class is in the game that I'm about to talk about, and that's Kansas City Chiefs versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, where we got Tony. Because Kadarius Toney, I mean, it looks like he's going to feel good there in Kansas City. Fits in just fine. Really displayed his talent. As everybody's saying, let's get down with 90 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown and 6 touches. I mean, some might say that it was like the Jags defense was saying, get whatever you want, especially on that touchdown where the nearest defender was 20 yards away from him, which is basically like they were in Kansas. All right, I mean, this is ridiculous. How in the world does Toney get that wide open? Patrick Mahomes actually said after the game that he was yelling, hey, at him because he was that far open. So, I mean, look, Mahomes has been great, but when you add somebody like Toney to that offense and you're able to get things going with him when Mecole Hardman's out, Juju Smith-Schuster has to exit the game, Toney steps up, and this might be a game that he will remember with an entry in his diary.
By the way, Tony. None of them spelled it like Tony. It was Tony, Toni, and Tone, all with exclamation points. There was no Toney. So maybe they could add a fourth Tony to the mix if they would get back together. They broke up in 1997, however, so that's probably not happening. Well, the thing on Juju Smith-Schuster, I still don't understand why that wasn't a flag for that hit that he took. Vicious.
Which we'll talk about more later in the show.
We're going to talk about that coming up later in the show. So anyway, if I see, they rejected my suggested rundown for the program. Segment 1, Vikings-Bills. Segment 2, Vikings-Bills. Segment 3.
You just didn't check what the rest of the show was supposed to be.
I'm working off of my suggested outline. More PFT Live right after this. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.